You can be in the middle of a conversation and still feel as if part of you is standing outside it, watching. One part of you is speaking. Another part is monitoring your voice. One part is listening. Another is checking whether your face looks interested enough. You notice where your hands are, how long you have been talking, whether your laugh sounded forced, whether your answer was too honest, and whether the pause before you responded made you seem awkward. By the time the conversation ends, you may remember less of what was said than how you believe you appeared while saying it. From the outside, this can look like self-awareness. You seem thoughtful, controlled, considerate, and careful. You notice how your behavior affects other people. You can adjust quickly when a room changes, but inside, it may feel less like awareness and more like surveillance. You are not simply experiencing yourself. You are observing yourself, editing yourself, and evaluating yourself at the same time. And that creates distance. You are present in the room, but not fully inside the moment. You are participating, but also reviewing your participation while it is still happening. The result is a painful paradox. The more determined you become to act naturally, the less natural you feel. So the real question is not, why am I so self-aware? It is, when did awareness become a camera I could no longer turn off? Healthy self-awareness is the ability to notice your thoughts, feelings, needs, and behavior without immediately becoming trapped by them. It helps you recognize that you are getting defensive before you say something cruel. It helps you notice that you are tired before you agree to another responsibility. It helps you understand why a certain conversation touched an old wound. Self-surveillance is different. Self-surveillance does not simply notice. It monitors for mistakes. It asks, how am I coming across, before it asks, what do I actually think? It asks, do they approve of me? Before it asks, do I feel safe with them? It asks, was that the correct reaction? Before it asks, was that reaction honest? The difference is not whether you pay attention to yourself. The difference is what your attention is trying to accomplish. Awareness is curious. Surveillance is protective. Awareness says, something changed inside me. Surveillance says, fix it before anyone notices. For many people, this protective monitoring did not appear for no reason. Maybe you grew up in an environment where small mistakes were remembered for a long time. A joke became a story repeated at family gatherings. Excitement was called attention-seeking. A question was treated as disrespect. Crying made someone uncomfortable. Anger made someone withdraw. You may have learned that having an internal experience was not enough. You also had to manage how that experience looked from the outside. Or perhaps the pressure arrived later. You entered a school, workplace, social group, or relationship where belonging felt conditional. You were accepted when you were useful, calm, agreeable, impressive, or easy to understand. When you were uncertain, awkward, tired, or emotionally complicated, the atmosphere changed. So you became skilled at watching the atmosphere before it could change again. The problem is not the existence of an inner observer. The problem begins when the observer is never allowed to leave. Imagine that every ordinary interaction is being recorded for review. You walk into a room. The internal camera turns on. You tell a story. The camera zooms in. Someone gives a neutral response. The camera marks the moment. You go home. The interaction ends, but the recording continues to play. Why did I say it like that? Was I talking too much? Did they misunderstand me? Was my goodbye too abrupt? The mind may call this reflection, but reflection usually leads somewhere. It produces understanding, a decision, or a lesson. Surveillance produces more footage. It keeps collecting angles because none of them feel conclusive enough to prove that you are acceptable. This is one reason deeply self-aware people can still feel socially uncertain. They may have a great deal of information about themselves, but very little trust in themselves. They know their triggers. They know how they sound when nervous. They know what their face does when they feel left out. They know the exact type of person who makes them shrink. But knowledge alone does not create ease. Sometimes it creates a more sophisticated form of control. Instead of simply feeling nervous, you become nervous about appearing nervous. Instead of simply becoming quiet, you begin judging the quietness while it happens. Instead of losing your train of thought, you watch yourself lose it. and imagine how the loss must look to everyone else. Now, one difficult feeling has become two: the original feeling and the evaluation of the feeling. This is how self-consciousness multiplies. The first layer is the experience. The second layer is the observer. The third layer is the judge. The experience says, I feel uncertain. The observer says, I can see that I feel uncertain. The judge says, other people can see it too, and that means I am failing. Most suffering does not come from the observer alone. It comes from the judge borrowing the observer's information and turning it into a verdict. And because the judge speaks in your own voice, its conclusions can sound intelligent. It may say that it is helping you improve. It may say that reviewing the conversation will prevent future mistakes. It may say that controlling every expression is emotional maturity. But maturity does not require you to become your own audience every minute of the day. Think about the situations in which you become most aware of yourself. Is it around authority figures, people you admire, emotionally unpredictable people, confident strangers, or the people whose approval matters most? And what do you begin monitoring first? Your voice, your face, your words, your body, or the amount of space you take up? Share the pattern in the comments. Naming the exact moment the inner camera turns on can reveal what it is trying to protect you from. Self-surveillance becomes exhausting because attention is limited. When part of your attention is listening to another person and another part is evaluating your performance, both tasks receive less of you. You may appear distracted even though you are concentrating intensely. You may miss the warmth in someone's response because you are analyzing your own sentence. You may answer too slowly because you are testing several versions before choosing one. Then the delay itself becomes more evidence for the inner judge. See, you are awkward, but the awkwardness may not be your personality. It may be the result of trying to direct, perform, and review yourself at the same time. Imagine trying to dance while watching a live security feed of your body from 3 different angles. The problem would not be that you lack rhythm. The problem would be that your attention is divided between moving and measuring the movement. This division can become so familiar that you stop recognizing it as effort. You tell yourself you are simply quiet, but perhaps you're editing 10 possible responses. You tell yourself you are bad at groups, but perhaps groups create too many reflections of yourself at once. You tell yourself you have no personality, but perhaps your personality has learned to wait until the room feels safe enough to appear. This is why some people feel completely different depending on who is around them. With one friend, they are funny, quick, expressive, and spontaneous. With another person, every sentence feels formal. In a safe room, their personality moves before the observer can interfere. In an uncertain room, the observer arrives first. That does not mean the relaxed version is real and the careful version is fake. Both are responses within the same person, but one response is organized around connection. The other is organized around protection. The question feels frightening because adaptation may have been the main way you maintain belonging. If you stop editing, will you become selfish? If you speak before rehearsing, will you sound foolish? If you let your face show disappointment, will you become difficult? Self-surveillance survives by exaggerating the consequences of small imperfections. It treats an awkward sentence as a social emergency. It treats a quiet moment as evidence of failure. It treats being misunderstood as proof that you expressed yourself incorrectly. But communication has never offered perfect control. Even the clearest person can be misunderstood by someone committed to misunderstanding them. Even the warmest person can encounter someone distracted, guarded, tired, or preoccupied. Even a thoughtful answer can land badly because the timing is wrong. When you accept that other people's responses are influenced by their own histories, moods, expectations, and limits, you stop treating every reaction as a precise measurement of your performance. This does not mean ignoring feedback. It means placing feedback in context. A useful question is this information about my behavior, or am I treating it as information about my worth? Maybe you interrupted someone. That is information about behavior. You can apologize and practice listening. Maybe a joke hurt someone. That is information about impact. You can repair the moment. Maybe your presentation was unclear. That is information about a skill. You can improve the structure. But "I interrupted once" is not the same as "I am unbearable." My joke landed badly is not the same as "I should never be spontaneous." My presentation was unclear is not the same as "everyone can see that I do not belong here." The inner judge collapses behavior and identity into one category because identity feels easier to control through shame. If you believe the problem is who you are, you can monitor everything. If you believe the problem is one specific behavior, you only need to address that behavior. This is why self-compassion is not the opposite of accountability. It is what makes accurate accountability possible. Shame says everything is evidence. Compassion asks what the evidence actually supports. There is another pattern that often appears after social interactions: post-event review. You return home and replay the conversation. At first, the review feels useful. You are trying to understand what happened. But slowly, the review changes. You stop remembering the full interaction and begin remembering selected moments. The pause, the expression, the sentence you wish you could replace. Each replay increases the emotional intensity of those moments. The conversation becomes more embarrassing in memory than it felt while it was happening. You may even begin imagining reactions that you never clearly observed. Perhaps they thought I was trying too hard. Perhaps they noticed my hands shaking. Perhaps everyone talked about it after I left. The mind fills missing footage with the explanation it fears most. A more grounded review separates three things: what happened, what you felt, and what you cannot know. What happened? I lost my place while telling the story. What you felt? I felt exposed and embarrassed. What you cannot know? Whether everyone judged me negatively. This separation prevents emotion from pretending to be evidence. You are allowed to feel embarrassed without proving that you embarrassed everyone. You are allowed to feel rejected without proving that rejection occurred. You are allowed to feel visible without proving that everyone was watching. The deeper freedom does not come from believing that no one is paying attention. Sometimes people are paying attention. Sometimes they do form opinions. Sometimes you will make a mistake in public. The deeper freedom comes from knowing that observation is survivable. You do not need invisibility to feel safe. You need the capacity to remain on your own side while you are visible. That capacity begins with changing the job of the inner observer. Instead of asking the observer to prevent every mistake, ask it to notice when you have stopped participating. You might catch yourself planning the next sentence instead of listening. You might notice that you are smiling automatically, even though you disagree. You might realize that your shoulders are tight and your breathing is shallow. You might hear yourself giving a polished answer that does not contain what you actually mean. At that point, the observer can become a doorway back into the moment. It can say, "I am watching myself again." Then it can step aside. One practical way to do this is to decide whether the situation requires performance or participation. Some situations genuinely require performance. A job interview requires preparation. A presentation requires structure. A difficult conversation may require careful language. In these moments, self-monitoring has a clear task and a clear ending. But many ordinary moments do not require a performance. Eating lunch with a friend does not require a perfect personality. Sending a casual message does not require 6 drafts. Answering a simple question does not require the most impressive version of the truth. When you identify a participation moment, give yourself a different goal. Not make the right impression. Try. Stay connected to what is happening. Connection might mean hearing the full answer before preparing yours. It might mean asking the question you are genuinely curious about. It might mean allowing one sentence to come out less polished than usual. The point is not to force spontaneity. Forced spontaneity is still a performance. The point is to reduce the number of decisions that must pass through the inner judge. Another useful practice is choosing one external anchor. When you become trapped in self-monitoring, direct attention towards something real and specific outside you. Listen for the main idea in the other person's sentence. Notice one detail in the room. Feel your feet against the floor. Follow the rhythm of the conversation rather than the image of yourself inside it. This is not distraction, it is redistribution. You're taking attention away from the internal control room and returning it to the shared world. You can also practice small doses of visible imperfection. Send a low-stakes message without rereading it 5 times. Admit, I lost my train of thought. Let yourself say, I do not know. Tell a trusted friend, I am a little nervous today. Leave a harmless pause unfilled. These moments teach the nervous system something that analysis cannot teach. Imperfection does not always end belonging. Sometimes confidence is not the feeling that you will perform well. Sometimes confidence is the belief that you will not abandon yourself if the performance is imperfect. The safest place to practice is with people who do not punish humanity. Notice who allows you to change your mind. Notice who does not mock your enthusiasm. Notice who can tolerate a pause without turning it into pressure. Notice who responds to a mistake with proportion rather than humiliation. Self-surveillance is not only an internal habit, it is shaped by the environments you keep entering. Some people bring out your natural self-awareness. Others activate your internal security system. You do not have to label every activating person as harmful. Sometimes they remind you of an old dynamic without intending to, but you should still take the effects seriously. A relationship that requires constant impression management may not be offering the safety you keep trying to manufacture through better performance. You cannot always monitor yourself into feeling secure around someone who benefits from your uncertainty. This is where boundaries matter. A boundary may mean reducing how much personal information you share with a critical person. It may mean refusing conversations where every emotion is used against you. It may mean asking for time instead of producing an immediate polished answer. It may mean spending more time with people around whom your attention naturally moves outward. The goal is not to become exactly the same in every room. Human beings are contextual. We all adjust. The goal is to notice whether adjustment helps you communicate or requires you to abandon yourself. Exhale longer than you inhale. Let your shoulders drop. Feel the weight of your body supported by the floor or chair. Move your eyes slowly around the actual room. These actions communicate that you are not only an image being viewed, you are a living person occupying space, and living people are allowed to be unfinished. They pause. They change tone. They choose the wrong word. They become excited. They need clarification. They sometimes look nervous because they are nervous. The aim is not to hide every sign of your internal life. It is to trust that your internal life does not need constant concealment. If self-monitoring is interfering with work, relationships, sleep, eating, speaking, or your ability to leave the house, that level of distress deserves professional support. Intense self-consciousness can be connected to anxiety, shame, past criticism, or other experiences that are difficult to untangle alone. Support is not about teaching you to stop caring how you affect people. It is about helping care become flexible instead of compulsory. Because the deepest problem is not that you can see yourself clearly. It is that you may have learned to see yourself only from the outside. You know how you might appear, but not always what you need. You know how to avoid being difficult, but not always what you believe. You know how to create a comfortable version of yourself for the room, but not always whether the room is comfortable for you. Real self-awareness includes both directions. It can look outward and ask, how did my behavior affect them? And it can look inward and ask, what happened to me in that interaction? It can repair harm without turning the whole self into a problem. It can receive feedback without surrendering identity. It can notice an awkward moment without building a permanent story around it. The goal is not to destroy the inner observer. The observer helped you become thoughtful. It helped you recognize patterns. It may have protected you in environments where social mistakes felt expensive, but a protector that never rests eventually becomes a prison guard. You can thank it for noticing and still refuse to let it direct every scene. You can enter a room without rehearsing the entire version of yourself you plan to become there. You can listen without grading your listening. You can speak without watching the sentence leave your mouth from across the room. You can feel nervous without turning nervousness into a public failure. And you can be misunderstood without treating misunderstanding as evidence that you should disappear. Self-awareness was never meant to be a permanent surveillance system. It was meant to be a mirror. A mirror can help you adjust something when adjustment is needed. Then you are allowed to look away and return to your life. In the next video, we can uncover another layer of this pattern. Why people who are afraid of being misunderstood often explain themselves far beyond what the moment requires, and why more explanation does not always create more safety. Subscribe to Layered Psychology so you do not miss that next hidden pattern, or tell me in the comments which behavior you want us to decode next.